Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Vilk, a psychoanalyst and relationship specialist, and I'm your host, Mr. Ayala, a psychoanalytical psychotherapist and relationship specialist. Tonight, we're working on communicating and fighting constructively in our relationships with our partners. So, Dr. Vilk, who has much experience with couples and communication, is going to explore with us what it means to be proactive versus reactive in your relationships when you're arguing. So, Dr. Vilk, what's the difference?
Being proactive versus reactive is a part of being able to fight constructively with someone and communicate in your relationship, because it's a lot harder to come back and go back into those loving feelings with your partner if you're reacting. Something has already happened. If someone calls you a name, it's harder to come back and feel loving towards them versus someone being proactive and saying, look, when you do this, I feel angry. And then you can talk about it and move through that. So I think that's part of being able to fight constructively and talk about things before something negative does happen.
Yeah, and it seems like it's teaching, having the other person, or you teaching the other person how to communicate with you. Mm-hmm. So say we're talking to each other, but I keep cutting you off and you let it happen. That's teaching me that, you don't give a damn, I can cut you off, which isn't really any good. But if I keep cutting you off and you're saying hey, you're cutting me off, or you just keep speaking over me, that's a way of teaching me hey, don't cut me off, don't shut me down. Yeah, so that would be more of a proactive instead of a reactive kind of way of speaking.
Yeah, and I think it is about educating, because you might not even know you're doing it, right? It might not be a malicious thing. It might be that if you did interrupt, you don't realize it. And if I don't tell you, hey, I feel mad when you do that, I don't like when you do that behavior, how could you know? I mean, there's just no way you could know from that unless you were aware of it. So the best way to help someone and educate them is to be open and honest. And I think that kind of segues into accepting whatever feeling you're having. I have so many clients who say, I know I shouldn't feel angry. And I said, well, why not? That seems like the appropriate feeling state. And they say, well, when I'm angry, I yell. And they don't really understand that the feeling state is different than the action. If you can control your behavior, you don't have to worry about controlling your thoughts and feelings. So it's more about, okay, I feel angry. What can I do with this in a constructive way? And it's much better to tell the person, I feel angry about this, and put it into words than yell.
Yeah, some people are just scared that once they get angry and they allow themselves to get angry, they're going to lose control. Mm-hmm. Impulsivity is going to take over, and they're going to break something. Throwing stuff to break it during an argument, that's like the classical kind of idea of what happens. So it does happen, and maybe they saw that's how people used to argue, like your parents or your friends or uncles, so maybe they're scared of that because they've seen it and that's the way they know how to do it, to argue. So there's got to be some way to learn how to not do that. Sometimes we can know let's not throw something, but we might just do it anyway though.
Well, I think you bring up a good point. I think people can feel like it's dangerous to feel angry because they don't feel like they can control their own impulses, or like you said, they're modeling their behavior after what they've learned in their earlier relationships, like parents. So if the parents couldn't communicate appropriately, the child, that's how they learn how to express themselves, and it might not be the healthiest way to do that. That's why I think therapy can be so helpful, is it's accepting feelings but using them in a different way to try to get what you want, whether that's being understood or having a different experience in a relationship.
Yeah, so when you accept the feelings, you understand the feelings, you can have the feelings, you can control the feelings, and then you can communicate to someone else, hey, this is what's happening to me, I'm feeling pissed right now, so can you just give me a minute, or can you speak to me this way, or this is something better, which will take away a lot of the strife and a lot of the fights in relationships.
Yeah, and I think, the other danger is people think that if they express anger, they're going to lose that person. Which isn't always the case. In most cases, after having a conversation it is intimacy, that's intimate when you talk about anger, people usually end up feeling a lot closer. They feel, kind of this reinforcement that it's safe to talk about this feeling, and they come out of it, usually if it's done correctly, they feel more understood and closer with the person that they had this negative feeling about. So it really can help them actually feel more positively.
Yeah, we have this messed up culture where we think that love and romance has to be perfect all the time, and that's nonsense. you have to fight in a sense. You have to have kind of traumatic events in your relationship because that's how you grow out of traumatic events. If you never had a bad event in your relationship, someone's lying. You know, you could just be someone's very just appeasing, and that's not a real relationship.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a difference between being cooperative and compliant. You know, if you're cooperative, you're doing things because you want to do them and work with the person. If you're being compliant, you're begrudgingly doing something. So you can end up resenting your partner. You end up losing out on getting what you want in the relationship. So I think you're right. And, you know, it's normal to love and hate our partners. We're going to love them sometimes, and sometimes they're going to drive us crazy.
Yeah. I mean, so what's one thing you could say to someone that they're like, you know, my lover and I were always fighting. We don't know how to argue. Like one thing they can do or keep in mind or anything like that?
I think the best thing you can do is try to put things into I statements. I mean, I know it's kind of one of those things that people feel like they hear all the time, but people are going to have a different reaction if you say, I feel angry when you interrupt me versus you are always interrupting me and I hate it. I mean, people just are less defensive and they're more prone to receiving that education that you're just telling them how their actions affect you emotionally. So I think just trying to keep that in mind instead of accusing someone of doing something, really trying to say I feel angry or I feel upset, you know, when this happens to educate them. It's a teaching moment.
Yeah. It's to stop the attacks. It's to make it from a fight to a conversation, right? That's like the whole point. Because the fight is you did this, no, you did this, and there's not any listening. There's just like, you know, you're just taking any ammunition you got to use against them to hurt them. Yeah. And we get stuck into that when we're fighting. So yeah, to make it a conversation. Yeah. And one of the things that I think about is that you have to remember that who you're with isn't a mind reader. And a lot of the times you really think like, oh, if he loved me or she loved me, they would have known this or known not to do that, which starts a fight, you know? So that's one of the things that I keep in mind. Like, no, we're not mind readers. It doesn't matter if you've been together for a month or for 30 years. There's no existence of mind reading. You know, you can get pretty good after 30 years, but that doesn't exist. And you have to tell your lover, like, no, this is what I want. I mean, it's scary to be open that way, to actually say what you want. And a lot of times we say the things that we don't want because we think it's safer or it's less risk of losing them if, you know, we actually, you know, not opening up. But that's something we really got to do.
Well, I think you bring up a good point. When you accuse someone, you know, you're making the assumption they're intentionally doing something to hurt you, which I think puts people on the defense, but they're not a mind reader. They might not know what they're doing is hurtful to you. They might not always know. So it's better to not, I mean, I think it's good to give your partner the benefit of the doubt with certain things. And, you know, instead of accusing them of trying to do something to hurt you, saying, well, look, do you know that I feel hurt when you do this? And this is how I'm feeling. Or can you put yourself in my shoes and imagine how I would feel? And, you know, most people, they're not always aware they're hurting another person. So, again, it's a teaching moment. And like you said, knowing your partner's not a mind reader, they may not know that some of their actions are hurting you the way that they do.
Yeah, so we know a lot of times our fights will start when our lover tells us no. And that will ignite us. You know, the argument's going to start, or we shut down, or we freeze up. So what are some of your thoughts on saying and receiving no's in relationships, Dr. Vilk?
I'm thinking about saying and receiving no, and, you know, following up on kind of being a mind reader is the ability to receive no from your partner. So, say, just because you say you want something, I want my partner to, go out to my this party with me, and then being angry if they don't. When people in couple sessions bring something like this up to me and say, well, I wanted him to come with me, I usually say, did he agree to that? And they kind of get confused. Well, no, I wanted him to come to this work party. Well, okay, but did you ask him and did he say yes? Well, no, he told me he didn't want to go, and then he didn't go. So being able to receive no from your partner, and just because you ask for something, it doesn't mean that they're obligated to say yes to you. They might not want to do that thing. And that goes both ways. Your partner could ask you something, and it's okay for you to say no.
Yeah. I mean, one of the problems with saying no or receiving no is that you feel like you're rejecting or being rejected. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the main things. I don't think that's really recognized. Like, we know we get hurt, but we're not sure what the hurt is really about. But there's a lot of rejection, and rejection has a lot to do with trust. So if you have your spouse and they say no all the time to everything, you kind of don't trust in them because they feel really unreliable, right?
And they can make you feel unwanted.
Yeah.
That's another core.
Yeah. So there's you gotta find a way to balance out the no's. There has to be no's for a reason. You know, there's people who say yes to everything. They really need to learn how to say no, right? For a little bit of the self-respect we were talking about earlier. But those who say no all the time, they really need to learn how to say yes. And it's really learning how to say the right kind of no's. You know, if you don't want to go to a party just because you don't want to, that's not a major no. You know, if it's like someone's, you know, birthday or graduation, like if your spouse or your boyfriend or girlfriend is going to be graduating and you say no to their graduation, that's a major no, you know, and you have to really check on that. You know, why are you saying no to this? And that's when you got to start talking again, because there must be something wrong, you know?
Yeah, there has to be a balance, and so relationships are about compromise. Sometimes something is going to be very, very important to your partner, and that's a really important time to say yes. And you might not want to go to, say, her aunt's wedding, but, you know, if it's really important to your partner, that's going to mean a lot to them. So, you know, we do make sacrifices, but I think it's more, like you mentioned, it's not, I don't want to go because I don't want to go. It's, well, I don't want to go because, you know, I have a funeral to attend to. I mean, a real reason that you're saying no to some of these things. So having that balance is very important.
Yeah.
Everybody, well, thank you for joining Dr. Vilk and I as we started to explore communication issues in our relationships and knowing how to say and receive no's. Join us next week where we hit up another topic that'll help with understanding yourself and your relationships. So follow us here on iTunes and YouTube where you can get notifications of our weekly podcasts, and throw us a share if you liked what you heard here. We'll catch you next time.